Hey beautiful people, what is up? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome to another video. I am barefaced because I'm actually getting ready to go to the gym, but I have about 30 minutes before I need to leave, so I thought I would just come sit down and film this. It's kind of like a new makeup releases video, but not. Because I want to talk specifically about the new Hourglass palettes. Yes, Hourglass has more palettes. You know, it's kind of confusing. So I thought I would sit here, walk through it with you guys, because when it comes to these Hourglass palettes, everything is repeated. All of them are repeat shades. So I want to sit there, talk through it with you guys. Let me know what you guys are thinking. I kind of am interested, but maybe y'all could talk me out of it. All right, let me go ahead and scooch over to the side. If you're interested, if you like this kind of video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and let's just dive in. Okay, so we are officially like deep into holiday releases. You guys know every year around this time, brands start bringing out their big sort of holiday releases kind of early. And it is some of the most anticipated releases of the year. And the Hourglass holiday palettes are probably one of the most exciting launches in the beauty community for a couple of reasons. I think first and foremost, this only happens once a year and they truly are limited edition palettes. And because of that limited edition quality, there is like a little bit of a collector's mentality when it comes to the Hourglass holiday palettes. Secondly, the cost. Now, I know these palettes are $90, so they're by no means cheap, but in the grand scheme of things, when you look at the cost of an individual product, whether it be blush, bronzer, or highlighter from Hourglass, they're extremely expensive. So if you were to buy all of these products individually, in terms of cost, you're coming out way better with purchasing the palette, even though you're going to get slightly less product. For example, one of these powders will retail for like $56 to $58 versus $90 for 6 powders, which is a pretty big deal. Or even if you look at the multi or the trio palettes that they have, those retail for $70. You're only getting 3 shades versus the 6 for $90. So in terms of cost, and I'm not going to do a whole cost per gram breakdown because I don't think that really matters. Well, at least not to me. But in terms of cost, it is a really cost-effective way if you wanted to try the Hourglass powders. I think the other thing too to keep in mind with these releases is that it is a very sort of like diverse palette when you think about it, because you can either buy these products individually, but you don't really get all of them together as one. So when you purchase an Hourglass palette, typically you're going to get highlighter, or strobing light as they call it, bronzer, and a blush, and a finishing powder. So those are 4 different formulas in one palette for that $90 price point. So as much as I dislike the price, I understand the value in it, and I understand why people keep shopping. Now, before we go any further, I do want to also acknowledge that we've been doing this for a couple of years now, and Hourglass still has not created products for dark skin tones. They have barely, and I mean barely, scratched the surface when it comes to deep skin tones. They have not even remotely dipped a toe or fingernail or any piece of a body part into the dark category. And it really is disappointing to see them continuously release products and just completely be like, we're not even gonna try. And they can't. It irks all of my soul, but I'm not gonna spend too much time on that. Anyways, so this year we saw Hourglass release 3 palettes. This is the same as they've done in the last 2 years. I don't entirely know what the theme is for this collection. Last year it was very much, what was it? Was it giving animal? It was pretty animal themed. So we had snake, we had leopard, we had jellyfish. And the year before it was also animal themed. We had tiger, we had elephant, and I don't even remember what the last one is. But I'm saying all that to say that every year we kind of get a light, medium, and a deep palette, or at least for the last 3 years. So this year, for Hourglass's holiday release, they gave us 3 palettes again. We had the Dragon palette, the Evil Eye palette, and the Lotus palette. Now, one thing I do want to commend them for, and that's honestly probably too much credit, is that with the 3 palettes this year, they were I don't want to say they were very conscious. That's way too much credit. With the 3 palettes this year, one of the things that they did do is that of the 6 shades that are in each palette, only 1 is a repeat shade and all 5 of the other shades are brand new shades for each individual palette. And I think that's really important because, again, going back to what I said at the beginning, this becomes like a collector's item for a lot of us. So when you continuously get repeat shades, at a certain point you kind of have to put your foot down and be like, I'm not buying it because I already have these shades 2, 3, 4, 5 times over. And I will make sure to link my previous review of the Lotus palette down below if you guys want to see it. That way you can see how it performs on my skin tone. And at the end of that video, I also did comparisons where I showed the Lotus palette to the collection that I have. Since that video, I have decluttered 2 of my Hourglass palettes. I sold them on Mercari. Those things sold within minutes of me putting it up there. So I don't have 2 of them, but they weren't going to work for my skin tone, and I wasn't using them anyway. And quite frankly, and I keep saying a lot of quite franklys, but when it comes to the Hourglass palettes, like really there is no need to collect them all, because at the end of the day, the shades and the colors that are in the palettes are on very similar across palettes. So you will get like a pinky blush, you'll get like a mauvey blush, you might get something that leans a little bit more orange. The bronzers leave a lot to be desired if you are my complexion or deeper. The finishing powders are nice, and the strobe lighters or the highlighters, yes, they can be different, but honestly, it's some kind of variation of gold, you know what I mean? So it doesn't feel like you're getting anything super unique, even though these are technically different shade names. So in the previous 2 years, I've always purchased the deep and the medium version of the palette. This year, I decided I was only picking up the Lotus because honestly, looking at the ones from the medium category, the medium category this year felt more light than medium, and I knew it wasn't going to work for me, so I wasn't about to waste my good hard-earned coin, because again, these are $90 on a palette where I wasn't going to be able to use it. So this is the Lotus palette from this year. And currently, I have 2, 4, 6 of the Hourglass palettes in total. So again, Lotus palette, this is 2024. The Elephant and the Tiger palette, this is from 2022. Then we have the Snake, and this is technically the Leopard palette, but in owl packaging. This is from 2023, so last year. And this is a much, much older one. I don't even know what year this one is from. But this is the Ambient Lighting Edit Universe Unlocked palette. So if you know what year that one was from, let me know. Okay, so Hourglass gave us their holiday palettes for this year, and in the midst of them giving us holiday palettes, there was also like because it wasn't really a secret, but Hourglass had a collaboration with Barneys. I was a little bit surprised by this, but maybe it makes sense, because when you think about how shopping used to operate kind of like back in the day, you know, department stores really ruled the kind of shopping arena, especially when it comes to luxury makeup. Like, people were going to department stores like the Bloomingdale's, the Barneys, the Saks, the Nordstroms. That's where they were buying their luxury products, because it wasn't, you know, shopping online doesn't give you the experience of luxury as much as going into a store and working with a sales associate and having them walk you through the products, being able to see it, to touch it, all of that right there. And then there's like the bright lights of the malls, but you guys know, malls are a dying breed. So when Hourglass released this collaboration with Barneys, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit surprised. I was like, I don't understand the history of Hourglass and Barneys, but if you guys know, let me know, because I am genuinely curious. Anyways, so with that collaboration, I personally thought that it was just going to be an Hourglass palette, because what they did, which was extremely disappointing, was that they re-released the Elephant palette, which was a 2022 holiday palette, in this Barneys packaging. And it was just that one palette. Now, I will admit I was extremely disappointed by that, because of the mere fact that the Elephant palette is only going to work for medium skin tones at best and lighter. So they didn't even attempt to use the darkest option so that it could be used across all of the skin tones. No, they took the middle one, and I don't know why, because it didn't make much sense to me. But they chose the Elephant one, they repackaged it in this Barneys packaging, and that was it. And then at a later point, there was this release of merch. So right now, if you go to the Hourglass website, and I assume that this is also being sold on Barneys as well, not 100% sure, but I'm gonna assume that it is. They have a ton of products, including a hat, a hoodie, a crew neck, and this the hoodie and the crew neck are $150 a piece. I don't know about y'all, but I'm not paying $150 for no black Hourglass X Barney hoodie. Just saying, I'm not doing that. There's a perfume. I don't know if this is Hourglass's first fragrance. I didn't know if they did fragrance or not, but the fragrance is $195. So y'all know, not cheap at all. There's a basic white tee, and I mean basic white tee with literally the smallest print in the front for $75. Wait, does it come in other colors? It says 10 shades. Well, I guess you can either get it in black or white. So you can either get a basic black tea or basic white tea. And then there's some writing in the back. There is a tote bag for $30. It kind of looks like a plastic bag. Like the shape of it is very plastic bag-esque. So it's not exactly something worth looking at. There's a real tote bag though for $55. A designer tote for not, well, apparently there's a couple of tote bags. So it looks like there's 4 different tote bags, and they're either $30 or $55. And then another basic white tee for $75. And I think what is probably the most comical thing about this is that there's also a singular roll of toilet paper in this Barneys and Hourglass packaging for $25. I don't know if this is a joke or not. Like, it has to be a joke, right? Like, am I missing something? Oh, and there's also a mug. So if you a basic red coffee cup for $30. So that's kind of like the merch side of it. But then there's makeup. Now, I didn't expect or know that there was going to be more makeup. Oh, there's also a Matchbox. There's a Matchbox for $30. Do people even use Matchboxes? Anyways, okay, we're getting off track. But let's talk about the makeup. So I thought we were just going to get that one singular palette that they had re-released, and that was going to be done with it. But it turns out that there was actually an Hourglass and Barneys pop-up where they launched 2 additional Hourglass palettes. Now, what I've heard from other creators who actually did go to the pop-up is that the intent was that that pop-up would have those 2 new Hourglass X Barney palettes on sale there and there only. So it was kind of a bit of an incentive for people to actually show up to the pop-up because it wouldn't be sold anywhere else. Now it's online. I don't know why. I don't know how. Maybe they didn't sell enough at the pop-up. And I mean, they have to get rid of it. It's not exactly like they're just going to leave it stocked there. So now it's available on the Hourglass website. I don't know if it's on Barneys, but it is on the Hourglass website. I think the important thing to note about this is that they didn't make any fuss, muss, nothing about this. This has not been promoted at all. So these 2 new palettes just showed up, and here they are. In addition, there is also, I should say, a lipstick duo at $68, which personally is not bad considering what lipsticks cost. I don't need any lipsticks. I'm not even really checking for this. For me, it really is about the Hourglass palettes, because when it comes to shopping from Hourglass, it's not exactly a brand that I look at pretty broadly. I really am solely checking for them during the holiday time because I love their palettes, because you get a ton of product for the price, and I really, really enjoy their formulation. I really hate that they don't cater to dark skin tones, but in terms of what I'm able to get and what I'm able to use, I really do enjoy it. So these 2 new palettes just showed up. Now, that gives us 6 Hourglass holiday palettes technically, which is huge because they've never done this before. And I mentioned this in my last new makeup releases video, but there is also a quad floating around in the ether somewhere. It was hella random because it was just a singular quad, 4 shades, also very, very light. I don't even think that would have worked for medium complexions. But that singular quad was floating around in the ether, and now we got these 2 additional palettes. So in reality, that puts us at 7 Hourglass holiday palettes for 2024, which is wild to me. But I want to talk about kind of like the differences between the 6-pan palettes, ignoring the quad, because I don't know what that was. We're not even going to talk about the quad. So we have the 3 that they made the big hullabaloo about, that they've been talking about, that people have been sharing and purchasing: the Lotus, the Evil Eye, and the Dragon palette. Now that is currently available. That is the one where I think it's the most value, because you are getting those 5 new shades in each palette. Versus this Barneys collection, we have 3 palettes. All of them have the exact same packaging, so it doesn't even matter which one you buy, you're going to get the exact same packaging. But in terms of the shades that are included in that Barneys collection, they are all repeats. There's not a single new shade in that palette whatsoever. So I want to end this video by just kind of going through the shades of those new palettes so you guys are clear in terms of whether or not it is valuable to pick those up if you already have it in your collection. Now, I can only do this based on the shades that I have in mind, and I don't collect or purchase any of the Hourglass single products. So if they are available in like the singles, and you do have a singles collection, I would definitely double check before you purchase anything from this Hourglass and Barneys collab. Personally, I think I might pick up 1 palette on a sale, a 20% off, but we gonna have to see. So they have these palettes labeled as volume 1, volume 2, and volume 3. Volume 1 was the first one that we saw and the one that we thought was going to be the only palette. And like I said, that volume 1 palette is an exact copy of the Elephant palette. This was released in holiday 2022. So if you have the Elephant palette, you literally have volume 1 exactly. You don't even need to look for this. You don't even need to look for any other palettes or any other products. You have all of the shades in the Elephant palette. So volume 1 is not necessarily something that I would pick up because I already have the Elephant palette. That being said, I will say that if you are my complexion and you don't have Elephant or you missed it from that year, this does work for me, but not in the way in which it was really intended. And by that, I mean the bronzer is like a setting / finishing powder for me. The finishing powder is like an under eye setting powder for me. So the powdery shades that are like the bronzer setting finishing powders, like even these two finishing powders here are definitely like either... This one could be a finishing powder, but I tend to use these as kind of like under eye powders to set my concealer. And the bronzer I use as an all over face bronzer. The blushes are beautiful on my skin tone though. I will say the blushes are perfection on my skin tone. And the highlighter is really pretty as well. So if you are my complexion, you can make this work. It's going to look slightly different. Okay, let's talk about the volume 2 palette next. So I'll pop it up so you guys can see what it looks like. So again, we have 6 shades. All of these are existing shades within the Hourglass lineup. Some of them are in the holiday palette. Some of them are in the sort of main line of Hourglass products. So the first shade is the Ethereal Light Finishing Powder. I don't have that at all. And I will say that it is extremely light. It's almost like a white powder. It is almost like a white powder. That one would definitely be like an under eye setting powder, but I don't even know, man. So it is extremely light. Definitely not going to work on our skin tone. The second shade is the blush. It's the Sublime Flush Blush. I don't have that one either. It is a really pretty color though. It's like a peachy color versus more of the pinky shades. I'm not sure if that would work on my complexion because I do think that when it comes to Hourglass palettes, sometimes they do appear darker in their promo pics than they do in real life, which is really disappointing because then you get it and you're like, but this is going to be dusty on me. But I don't have it in my collection, so if I were to pick it up, that would be a new shade for me. Then we have Soft Light, which is a second finishing powder in this palette. Now, this is actually, again, in the 2022 Elephant palette. So I don't know why, but they picked a lot of shades from the Elephant palette. I don't know why. It is a really nice palette, I will say that. So Soft Light is this center shade here in the Elephant palette. I remember what I told you guys, this is not one that I would use as a finishing powder. It's more like an under eye brightening powder for me. But maybe in like the winter time when I get slightly lighter, I could actually use it as a finishing powder. So that's the third shade. And then going on to the second row, we start off with the Opal Strobe Light. That's a highlighter. I don't have it. It is interesting. It looks pretty. I think I might have had it. No, I never had that one. I was wondering if it was in one of the 2 palettes that I decluttered. Either way, I don't have it in my collection. So I don't have the Opal Strobe Light. Then in the center shade, we have another blush. That's Radiant Rose Blush. This, again, is in the 2022 Elephant palette. And that is this deep pinky mauve shade here. This is that Radiant Rose Blush. So if you have Elephant, you already have 2 of the shades from Volume 2. And then lastly, we have the bronzer in the Volume 2 palette. That's Lustrous Bronze Light. And that bronzer is actually included in 2 of the holiday palettes. So again, it is in the Elephant palette. So this is the Elephant palette. This is the bronzer here, which I think I said again, this bronzer definitely does not bronze me. So we have Lustrous Bronze Light here. And it is also in the 2023 Leopard palette. As a reminder, I chose the all packaging from last year, but this is the Leopard palette, and here we have Lustrous Bronze Light again. So if you have Leopard from last year, if you have Elephant, you already have 3 of the 6 shades in Volume 2. Which, again, it just doesn't make sense to me considering that Volume 1 is literally all of Elephant in one palette. So why would you then take 3 of Elephant and put it in Volume 2? Either way, so if you have Elephant, you have 3 of the shades, and if you have the Leopard palette from last year, you have 1 of the shades, which is the bronzer. So that is Volume 2. So I was thinking about this palette, I'm like, oh, would I pick this one up? I think I don't think that this is one that I would pick up for a couple of reasons. First, the shades, I have 3 of the 6 shades. So I have 50% of the palette already. And then of the remaining 3 shades that I don't have, one is an extremely light finishing powder. I mean, it's basically white, which, why would I do that to myself? The second is the blush. The blush is the only real thing that I want from it because it's a finishing powder, a strobe light, so a highlighter, and then a blush that I would be missing. The strobe lighters, the highlighters, they all kind of look the same to me, to be fair, especially on the skin, and then the blush is the only real thing. So this would have to be very, very heavily discounted in order for me to even think about picking it up. Because the truth is, even though I have 50% of the shades, the 50% of the shades that I do have, they actually do work for me. Now, not in the way that they intended necessarily, because I have to use the bronzer as a finishing powder, but I can make them work. So there's that. Something to think about if you were considering volume 2. And then finally, we have volume 3 of the Hourglass times Barney collab. And this, I'm assuming, is the deep version of this Barneys collection. I think they attempted to create a light, medium, deep palette for Barneys as they do with the holiday collection. I don't think they got it right, but you know, let's just go. So the first powder in the version 3 palette for the Barney and Hourglass collab is the Eternal Light Finishing Powder, which I actually do have because it's in the newest palette, the Lotus palette. So that is this shade right here. This is the finishing powder. This is actually really, really nice for deeper skin tones. I think it is actually a powder that you could use as a finishing powder if you are at least my complexion. The next shade is the Lucid Glow Blush. That is one that I don't have. It is one that is a little bit concerning to me because it's like yellow with speckles of pink in there. I don't know if it's gonna work on darker skin tones, to be quite honest. But I don't have it, so that's just something to note. Next is the Mood Exposure Blush. And that is a very, very popular blush shade. I actually think it's available in the main lineup as well. I think it's one of their most popular blushes. But it is also available in the Leopard palette from 2023, so from last year. And that is this shade right here. And something to note about all of the blushes in this palette is that they're all the marbled blush formula. I personally don't love this. I don't know why. I just don't think that those marble formula blushes tend to have the best pigment or payoff on my skin tone. I do think that sometimes they do end up looking a little ashy on me. So when it comes to the marble blushes, they're definitely not my go-to. They look pretty in the pan, but like honestly, who cares about if it looks pretty in the pan? Is it gonna look dusty on me? That's the important piece. But that being said, the Mood Exposure Blush is available in the Leopard palette from last year. So if you have that one, you already have one of the blushes. So far of the 3 top shades, I have 2. I have the finishing powder and I have the blush. So going into the second row, the first shade is the Infinite Strobe Light, and that's actually available in the 2023 Snake palette. So if you picked up the Snake palette from last year, this strobe light here is what is going to be available in the Hourglass and Barneys Volume 3 palette. And then the center shade is another blush. This is At Night blush. I actually don't have this one. This one does look really beautiful and it does look like it's going to show up really well on my skin tone. It's probably the most pigmented of the blushes in this palette and the most interesting in my humble opinion. And the last thing is a bronzer. It is Luna Bronze. I don't have that shade. I don't think it's one of their deeper bronzers to my knowledge, but I don't have that one either. So when it comes to the version 3 of the Hourglass palette, I also again have 50% of the palette. So I would be picking this up for a blush, for 2 blushes and a bronzer that I couldn't use to bronze myself. I could probably use as like a finishing powder. So honestly, like I do enjoy these palettes for the collector's nature in it. This is also like a super limited edition release because it's in collaboration with Barneys. That being said, I feel like I would need more than 20% off for me to pick up the Hourglass and Barneys collab palettes. Like, I don't feel any kind of special connection to Barneys. Like, it's not exactly like a place that holds like a dear piece in my heart. So I don't feel a special connection to Barneys. And considering that these palettes are $90, I wouldn't want to just throw that away because it's like a Barneys collab. But I do enjoy collecting the Hourglass palettes. They are palettes that definitely get used in my collection, so they don't just sit there and look pretty. I use them a lot. I travel with them. They're some of my favorite products, and I love the Hourglass formula. So it is something that if I were to get a pretty significant discount, I would seriously consider picking it up. But let me know down in the comments below, like, what are your thoughts on all of this? Like, this seems like a bit much, a bit random to have this many Hourglass holiday palettes and releases, especially with so much of the shades just being repeated over and over again. And now we have to figure out if we have it or not. But let me know in the comments below, are you interested in the Hourglass Barneys collab? Are you picking anything up? Do you want that $25 roll of toilet paper? I just find that so disrespectful, but you know, either way, leave all that in comments below. If you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button on your way out, or leave an orange heart if you don't know what to comment. And as always, I appreciate you all so much more than you know, and I'll catch you in my next one. Bye, guys.